Stop eating fruit for kidney health without checking one thing first, because the fruit you've been told is healthy might be the exact reason your kidneys are struggling to keep up. I know that sounds backwards. Every headline out there tells you fruit is universally good, that more is always better, that nature's candy can't possibly hurt you. But if you are over 60, and especially if you're over 70, your kidneys are not the same kidneys you had at 40. And what your body could once filter without a second thought can now sit in your bloodstream far longer than it should. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Kidney function naturally declines with age. Many researchers estimate somewhere around a 1% drop in filtration capacity per year after your late 30s, which means by the time you're 70, you may be operating with a meaningful fraction of the filtering power you had in your prime. That's not a scare tactic. That's just biology, the same way your hearing changes or your joints stiffen. Your kidneys are quietly doing less work with the same demands placed on them. And that changes everything about which fruit deserves a spot on your nightstand and which one deserves to stay in the fruit bowl until morning. I'm a doctor, and I've spent years talking with patients in their 60s, 70s, and 80s about exactly this: what to eat, when to eat it, and why timing matters as much as the food itself. Before we go further, I want to know who's watching tonight. Type your age in the comments and tell me one thing. Do you already snack before bed? Or are you someone who just white knuckles through the hunger until morning? I read every single comment on these videos, and I mean that literally. Your stories are what shape what I cover next, so don't be shy. Now, I promised you the most surprising fruit on this list, and I'm not going to make you wait until the end to know it exists. Sitting at number 1 tonight is a small, unassuming fruit that most people think of as a dessert topping rather than medicine. And the research behind it, when it comes to inflammation and blood pressure at the kidney level, is honestly more compelling than almost anything else I've studied this year. But we're going to build up to it properly, because the fruits ranked below it matter too, and understanding why they rank lower will help you understand why the winner works so well. One more thing before we count down. This video is about supporting healthy kidneys through fruit choices. It is not a replacement for your nephrologist or your primary doctor. And if you have diagnosed kidney disease, meaning your doctor has told you your filtration numbers are reduced, some of what I say tonight comes with an asterisk, because certain fruits that are wonderful for a healthy kidney can be genuinely risky for a compromised one. I'll flag that clearly as we go, because I'd rather you be informed than impressed. Let's start the countdown. Number 5, watermelon. Picture this: an older gentleman, let's call him Walter, 74, from a small town outside Sacramento, used to wake up at 2 in the morning with leg cramps so severe his wife would find him gripping the bed frame. This is the kind of story I hear constantly in my practice, and it usually traces back to one overlooked habit: chronic, mild dehydration that builds quietly over the course of a day and hits hardest at night, when the body has gone the longest without fluid. Watermelon is roughly 92% water by weight, which makes it one of the most efficient ways to hydrate without drinking large volumes of liquid right before bed, something many seniors avoid because it means multiple trips to the bathroom overnight. Your kidneys rely on adequate hydration to flush metabolic waste products like urea and creatinine out of your bloodstream. Think of your kidneys like a water treatment plant. If the water pressure running through the system drops too low, sediment and waste starts settling instead of flushing through. That's essentially what happens at a cellular level when you're mildly dehydrated for extended periods. The concentration of waste in your blood rises because there simply isn't enough fluid volume moving through the filtering units, which are called nephrons. For aging bodies specifically, this matters more than people realize, because your sense of thirst actually becomes less reliable as you get older. Research on aging and thirst perception has consistently shown that the hypothalamus, the part of your brain that signals thirst, becomes less sensitive over time, meaning many seniors are mildly dehydrated without ever feeling thirsty enough to do anything about it. Watermelon sidesteps that problem entirely because you're consuming fluid through eating, which doesn't rely on a thirst signal at all. If you're going to try this, aim for about 1 cup of cubed watermelon roughly 90 minutes before bed, which gives your body time to absorb the fluid and use the bathroom before you actually lie down. Pair it with a small pinch of sea salt. If your doctor hasn't restricted your sodium, this sounds counterintuitive, but a tiny bit of sodium actually helps your body retain and utilize the water you're consuming rather than flushing it straight through. which is called supporting proper fluid balance. One caveat here, watermelon does contain a moderate amount of potassium, so if you've been told your potassium levels run high, talk to your doctor before making this a nightly habit. Number 4 on tonight's list, apples. There's an old saying about apples and doctors that I think gets misunderstood. It's not really about vitamin C, it's about something called soluble fiber, specifically a type called pectin, which apples are particularly rich in. Studies looking at dietary fiber and inflammatory markers have found associations between higher soluble fiber intake and lower levels of C-reactive protein, which is a blood marker doctors use to measure systemic inflammation throughout the body. Why does inflammation matter for your kidneys specifically? As we age, our bodies tend to run in a slightly higher state of background inflammation, a phenomenon researchers sometimes call inflammaging essentially chronic, low-grade inflammation that increases with age even without an active infection or injury. Your kidneys are incredibly vascular organs, meaning they're packed with tiny blood vessels, and chronic inflammation can damage the delicate lining of those vessels over time. Similar to how rust slowly forms on pipes that are constantly exposed to a corrosive environment. Fiber-rich foods like apples appear to help by feeding beneficial gut bacteria, which in turn produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids that have anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body, including, researchers believe, benefits that extend to kidney tissue. For practical purposes, eat the apple with the skin on, since that's where most of the pectin and antioxidant compounds are concentrated, and choose a smaller variety like a Gala or Honeycrisp if you're eating it within 2 hours of bedtime, since a large apple can sometimes cause bloating that makes it harder to fall asleep. A wonderful synergy tip here is pairing your apple with a small handful of walnuts. The healthy fats in the walnuts slow down how quickly the natural sugars in the apple hit your bloodstream, which means steadier energy and less of a blood sugar spike right before you try to sleep. Now, before we get to number 3, I have to pause and ask you for something. If you've made it this far, it tells me you actually care about doing this the right way, not just watching for entertainment, and that means a lot to me. Please take 2 seconds and hit subscribe, because I put out these deep dive breakdowns every single week, and I don't want you to miss the ones covering blood pressure, joint health, and memory that are coming up soon. And if this video has taught you even one new thing so far, tap that like button. It genuinely helps this information reach other seniors who need it just as much as you do. I don't ask often, but this one matters to me. All right, let's continue. Number 3, pineapple. I think of pineapple as the most underrated fruit in the entire produce section, mostly because people assume it's just sugary and tropical with nothing else going on. But pineapple contains a unique enzyme called bromelain, found almost nowhere else in significant quantities in common fruit. Bromelain has been studied for its anti-inflammatory and mild diuretic supporting properties, and some research has explored its role in reducing swelling and supporting healthy circulation. Here's why this matters for aging kidneys specifically. As we get older, many of us experience some degree of fluid retention, especially in the ankles and legs, sometimes related to circulation, sometimes related to how our kidneys manage sodium and water balance. Bromelain appears to support the breakdown of certain proteins involved in inflammatory swelling, which is why some physical therapists have historically recommended pineapple or bromelain supplements around the time of surgery to reduce post-operative swelling. Think of bromelain like a cleanup crew that shows up after a small chemical spill. It doesn't prevent the spill, but it helps break down and clear the mess more efficiently than your body would on its own. The timing tip here is important. Eat your pineapple earlier in the evening, rather than right at bedtime, ideally 2 to 3 hours before you plan to sleep, because pineapple's acidity can occasionally cause reflux in older adults, and reflux is one of the most underrated sleep disruptors I see in my patients over 60. A 1/4 cup of fresh pineapple chunks is plenty. You don't need a large serving to get the benefit. For synergy, pair pineapple with a few pieces of fresh ginger, since ginger has its own anti-inflammatory compounds called gingerols, and together they seem to have a complementary effect on reducing that background inflammatory load we talked about earlier. Number 2, grapes, specifically dark red or purple grapes. I want to tell you about someone I'll call Marlene, 69 years old, from a suburb outside Cleveland, who came to me frustrated because her blood pressure readings kept creeping up despite taking her medication faithfully every morning. We talked through her entire routine, and one small thing stood out. She had almost completely cut fruit from her diet years earlier because a fad diet had convinced her all sugar, Even natural fruit sugar was the enemy. Once she reintroduced modest, appropriate portions of certain fruits, including dark grapes, alongside her existing treatment plan, she found her readings became more stable over the following months. I share that not as proof of anything on its own, but as an illustration of how fruit avoidance out of fear can sometimes do as much harm as fruit oval consumption. Dark grapes are rich in a compound called resveratrol, which lives primarily in the skin, and resveratrol has been studied extensively for its effects on blood vessel function. Research has suggested resveratrol may help support what's called endothelial function, which is essentially how well the inner lining of your blood vessels relaxes and constricts appropriately. Your kidneys receive an enormous percentage of your total blood flow relative to their size. Some estimates put it at around 20% of your cardiac output flowing through the kidneys at any given moment, despite the kidneys making up less than 1% of your total body weight. That means healthy blood vessel function isn't just a heart issue. It's directly tied to how well your kidneys receive the blood supply they need to filter properly. As we age, our blood vessels naturally become stiffer, a process related to declining elastin production in the vessel walls, and this stiffness can reduce how efficiently blood moves through smaller vessels, including the ones feeding your kidneys. Resveratrol appears to help counteract some of this stiffness by supporting nitric oxide production, which is the molecule responsible for allowing blood vessels to relax and widen when needed. Think of your blood vessels like a garden hose. A young, flexible hose expands and contracts easily with water pressure, but an old, stiff hose stays rigid and forces the water through under more strain. Keeping that flexibility for as long as possible is part of what dark grapes may help support. For preparation, choose grapes with deep, dark color, since that pigment is where most of the resveratrol concentration lives, and a serving of about 15 to 20 grapes in the evening is a reasonable portion. Freezing grapes for a couple of hours before eating them can also make them a satisfying, slow-to-eat snack that naturally limits overeating, since frozen grapes take longer to chew and enjoy than fresh ones. For synergy, pair your grapes with a small square of dark chocolate, at least 70% cacao. The flavonoids in dark chocolate and the resveratrol in grapes appear to work through overlapping pathways related to vascular health, giving you a combined effect that's more supportive than either food alone. And now, the fruit I promised you at the very beginning. Number 1, blueberries. I've studied a lot of foods over the years, and blueberries continue to surprise me every time I revisit the research. Compared to almost any other commonly available fruit, blueberries carry one of the highest concentrations of antioxidant compounds called anthocyanins, which are responsible for that deep blue-purple color. Anthocyanins have been the subject of a substantial body of research, specifically looking at kidney tissue, blood pressure regulation, and oxidative stress, which is the cellular damage caused by unstable molecules called free radicals accumulating faster than your body can neutralize them. Here's why this matters so much for an aging body specifically. Your cells contain tiny structures called mitochondria, which you can think of as the power plants inside every cell, responsible for converting the food you eat into usable energy. As we age, mitochondrial efficiency naturally declines, and this decline is particularly relevant in the kidneys, because kidney cells are some of the most energy-hungry cells in your entire body, given how much active filtering and reabsorption work they perform every single minute of every single day. When mitochondria become less efficient, they also tend to produce more of those free radicals we just talked about, creating a cycle where aging cells generate more oxidative stress precisely when they're least equipped to handle it. Anthocyanins appear to help interrupt this cycle by acting as antioxidants that neutralize free radicals before they can damage the delicate structures inside kidney cells, including the nephrons responsible for filtration. Some research has also linked regular anthocyanin-rich fruit consumption to modest improvements in blood pressure readings, which matters enormously for kidney health because your kidneys are essentially a network of extremely fine, delicate blood vessels, and consistently elevated blood pressure over years can cause slow, cumulative damage to those vessels, similar to how consistently running water at too high a pressure through old plumbing eventually wears down the pipes from the inside. There's also a timing element that makes blueberries particularly well-suited to an evening snack rather than a morning one. Some researchers have explored the concept of chrononutrition, which is essentially the idea that when you eat matters almost as much as what you eat, because your body's inflammatory and repair processes tend to ramp up overnight during sleep. Eating an antioxidant-dense food like blueberries in the evening may help support the body's natural overnight repair window, giving those anthocyanins time to circulate while your body is doing its nightly maintenance work. For practical preparation, a half cup to 1 full cup of fresh or frozen blueberries about an hour before bed is a reasonable serving for most healthy adults. Frozen blueberries actually retain their anthocyanin content quite well, so don't feel like fresh is required if frozen is more convenient or affordable. For synergy, and this is one of my favorite pairings, combine your blueberries with a small serving of plain yogurt. The probiotics in yogurt appear to enhance how well your gut absorbs and utilizes certain antioxidant compounds, essentially helping usher those beneficial molecules through your intestinal lining more efficiently, so you get more out of the same handful of berries. Now, the same caution applies here as with the other fruits on this list, though blueberries tend to be lower in potassium than many other fruits, which is one of the reasons kidney health researchers have taken a particular interest in them, even for patients with some degree of reduced kidney function. Still, if you have an existing kidney diagnosis, please run any new dietary habit past your care team first, even one that sounds as gentle as blueberries. I want to say something to you before we close out tonight, and I mean every word of it. Getting older does not have to mean surrendering your independence. It does not have to mean accepting that your body is simply falling apart and there's nothing left to do but manage the decline. Every single patient I've described tonight made small, consistent changes, not dramatic overnight transformations. And small, consistent changes compounded over months into real, measurable differences in how they felt, how they slept, and how confident they were in their own bodies. Your kidneys have been working quietly for you every single day of your life, filtering, balancing, protecting you in ways you've probably never had to think about. Giving them a little extra support now, especially through something as simple and pleasant as the right fruit at the right time, is one of the most accessible acts of self-care available to you, regardless of your income, your mobility, or where you live. It is never too late to start taking better care of the systems that keep you independent, active, and present for the people you love. If tonight's video gave you something useful, do me a favor and subscribe, because I have more of these deep dives coming every week, covering everything from joint pain to memory to heart health, all explained the same honest way, without the hype and without the scare tactics. And before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Out of everything we covered tonight, which fruit surprised you the most? And are you going to try adding it to your evening routine? I'll be reading every single response.